G'day guys, we've recently got our hands on a new balance data slate and field manual for points updates for Warhammer 40k, and there is some absolutely monstrous shakeups, particularly for our beloved Chaos factions. So in today's video, I want to break those down, go through them all with you, share some of my thoughts, and then get a conversation going with you in the comments section below. So with that being said, let's jump into the video.
One for the Blood God.
Are you tired of overkilling or underkilling enemy units? Tired of wasting time deciding how many attacks to allocate to achieve a desired outcome? And are you tired of complicated maths, calculating multiple weapon profiles with complex special rules? Well, thanks to today's sponsor, all of those problems are problems of the past. Adept Roll allows you to input the profile of your attacking units and the profile of the units they are attacking into to calculate expected results with precision. You can apply modifiers like Feel No Pain, -1 to hit, damage reduction, as well as enemy strats like Armor of Contempt to get precise results for what you expect your units to do on the tabletop. By rapidly simulating 1,000 rolls, Adept Roll will help you understand what your expected results are likely to be in any given tabletop situation. You can even save attacker or defender profiles to make data entry super fast and super simple, as well as importing them from various sources like Battlescribe or even screenshots from the Games Workshop app itself. So if you're looking to upskill, play like a pro, and stop making avoidable mistakes on the tabletop, download Adept Roll today and start playing with precision. Alrighty, we're going to break this video up into a few elements because there's a lot to cover. So first, we're going to be talking about all of the points changes that have come through in this recent update. Then, we're going to break down the new Demons Detachment, which allows you to pair Demons and Chaos Space Marines in a very interesting way. Then, we're going to talk about all of the new Demons data sheets because they got an entirely new index and there were some massive changes to all of the different data sheets that are available to us. So that's the plan for today's video. Let's get stuck into it. So let's start with the points changes. We're going to break this down into factions. So first we're going to talk about World Eaters. There wasn't a massive amount of shake-up here. We had the Demon Prince go down 15 points. He's now 185. We had the Demon Prince with Wings, also went down 15 points to 155. We had the Lord on Juggernaut. Interestingly, he went down 20 points and is a very attractive 80 points now. And then the two Predators went up 5 and 10 points, respectively, for the Annihilator and the Destructor. So, most of the common units that you see used in World Eaters armies were unchanged. You know, there was no changes to 8-bound, no changes to Berserkers, no changes to Angron. You know, even Terminators and things like that I've been quite, prolific in using. I haven't seen any changes there. And to me, this is a bit of a nothing burger of an update because those units that went down in points, we weren't taking them prior, and it wasn't because they were too expensive. It's because they didn't synergize well with what the rest of the army did. And as a result, you weren't really taking them anyway. An argument could be made that the Foot Demon Prince, the one that walks around, he was something that people would often take one of. But I don't think this is going to change that. I don't think now him going down 15 points means you're going to take more than one. So in terms of list construction, I don't see some massive changes here. An argument could be made that the Lord on Juggernaut is now an attractive alternative to things like your Jackals or your 5-man Berserker units that you use for those sort of level 2 trades where you're trading into something that's a little bit bigger than something a Jackals can take care of, but a little bit smaller than something required for 8-bound. You could go cool, the Lord on Juggernaut can now sort of fill that role. But ultimately, I don't expect to see any significant changes to the way that World Eaters play based on this. These points changes were not significant enough to bring any of these units into the fold. And if you were already taking a Predator, having them go up 5 points isn't going to break the bank. So if you've already made the decision that you want Predators, you're probably going to continue to bring Predators. And if you've already made the decision that you don't want Demon Princes, I don't think you're going to turn around and suddenly start running 3 in a list or anything like that. So not much in terms of World Eaters changes. Let's look at the Chaos Space Marines. Again, they didn't have a lot either. They had the Predator go up 5 points. they had the Forge Fiend go down 10 points, which is quite interesting because Forge Fiends are a very powerful unit. And then they had the Lord Discordant. He also went down 15 points. Very similar to the World Eaters in that I don't think this is going to change anybody's lists. I think people are going to run out and start, bringing 3 Lord Discordants. But I also don't think people are going to rip the Predators out of their list because they went up 5 points. So there's not a massive impact here on your Chaos Space Marine lists. However, here we do have some pretty significant changes, and that is in the Chaos Demons. Now, the reason that I've included the Chaos Demons, even though I haven't done a massive amount of content on them dedicated in the past, is because they can be used as allies in the above 2 factions, which are the 2 factions that I sort of specialize in. So, commenting on them is, relevant. So Be'lakor went up 50 points, so he became significantly more expensive, but he did get a new data sheet, and he's a lot more powerful, so we'll talk about that in a moment. The Epitome went up 20 points, Fiends went up, Fleshhounds went up 5 points for 5, or 10 points for 10, but they got a new data sheet ability as well. This new points cost factors that in, and I think makes them very attractive, so we'll talk about Fleshhounds later in the video. The Great Unclean one, he went up 20 points, new data sheet. Nurglings went down points, so for those Chaos Space Marine players that ally in the Nurglings so that you have a cheap infiltrating unit, well, now you can do that even cheaper. However, their abilities did change as well with the data sheets, so that's interesting. Rotigus went up 20 points, Screamers went down points, which is interesting because they were already a very competitively viable unit. Shalaxi went down 45 points, but she did cop some nerfs on her data sheet. And then the Mask of Slaanesh went up 10 points. So that's more or less all of the points changes that we've seen in this new balanced data slate. Now, let me know if I've missed anything. This was sent to me by somebody, and I have proofread it, but not thoroughly because I've been insanely busy lately. So it's entirely possible that something in here might have been missed, but it seemed to more or less check out when I went over it. So, but yeah, very, very comprehensive changes for the Chaos Demons. Lots of changes there, and I think that reflects their data sheets changing quite a lot, and a lot of the units will be filling slightly different roles than they used to. Particularly, I'm looking at Fleshhounds. So, yeah, that's the points changes. As for pure Chaos Demons lists, they have been completely flipped on their head. And the Chaos Demons lists that you were taking months ago don't exist, and the new Chaos Demons lists are very different. So, for those running pure Chaos Demons, it's a very exciting time to be trying out some different stuff. And for those looking to ally in Chaos Demons, there's definitely some interesting tech that you can use in these new data sheets.
Ned Kelly was an Australian bushranger, outlaw, and folk hero who was best known for wearing a homemade suit of armour during a shootout with police in 1880. Kelly became legendary in Australian folklore, with some viewing him as a symbol of resistance against authority, and others viewing him as a dangerous criminal. There is one question that historians have never been able to answer, and that is, what would Ned Kelly look like as a Space Marine? Well, he'd have to have his iconic metal helmet, of course, and big dirty trench coat. He'd have to have 2 pistols for shootouts. One would be a plasma pistol, the other a bolt pistol, just like Cypher. Like Cypher, he'd also obviously be a Space Marine, but more of a renegade Marine, one of the ones that hates demons and the warp and is just a rebel against a corrupt Imperium, an outlaw that is fighting back against corrupt authoritarianism. Yeah.
So, speaking of updates, let's have a look at the Chaos Demons and Chaos Space Marines detachment. So, this is a relatively interesting and unique detachment where you basically can take half of your army as Chaos Demons, the other half as Chaos Space Marines, and then there's a bunch of rules for how they interact with one another. So, the new detachment rule is you can include, it's Chaos Demons is your faction, but you can include up to 1,000 points of Chaos Space Marines. There are a few caveats, like no Demon Princes, no named characters, that sort of thing. And that goes for both the Demons and CSM sides, so you can't take Abaddon, but you also can't take Scarbrand, like there's no named characters outside of Be'lakor. because Be'lakor is a lad. But basically, the way that this detachment rule works is each of the demonic allegiances for your demons get a different ability. So all Khorne models gain advance and charge. All Slaanesh gain no Overwatch. You cannot target them with Overwatch. Tzeentch got -1 to hit across the board, and Nurgle got -1 to wound if your strength is above if their strength is above your toughness. Right? So Nurgle's hard to wound, Tzeentch hard to hit, Slaanesh tricky, you can't Overwatch him, and Khorne is fast, coming at you. And then Undivided, which is things like your Soul Grinders, etc. They get, unless you obviously mark them to one of the gods, but they get pacts. So the Pact of Chaos, just like in the CSM, where you get sustained or lethal hits, and Be'lakor auto passes his pacts. So that's basically making it so that your Chaos Space Marines, when they come in, they get to keep their Chaos Space Marine rules. But interestingly, all the Chaos Space Marines that you do bring in also gain Deep Strike. So being able to Deep Strike things like Chosen is going to be really, really powerful and really crazy in this detachment. So there's a few things worth noting in there. The Khorne being able to advance and charge, to me, is crazy. Even though in the previous detachments you had stratagems that allowed you to do that, the fact that it's not stratagem linked means that, first of all, you don't require the CP, and second of all, you can do it on every unit. So you've got Bloodletters rapid ingressing and then advancing and charging from that position. You've got Bloodthirsters moving their 12 inches and then advancing and charging from that position. Really, really powerful. Slaanesh being able to dodge Overwatch is pretty good, because there'll be some matchups where your opponent has really oppressive Overwatch, so being able to go, cool, well, this Slaanesh unit's going to jump out, they're going to declare the charge first, they charge you and tag you, now you're engaged, so therefore you can't Overwatch this Khorne unit that's coming out that just advanced and charge. That's very good. Tzeentch being -1 to hit just means that their little dork units that are often not out there doing actions and things like that are a little bit harder to remove. And then Nurgle, your big tanky things that are absorbing damage, are going to be significantly harder to hurt. So that's the detachment rule, and all in all, I think that's a really good detachment rule. It provides a lot of utility to a lot of units. Let's have a look at their stratagems, though, because in my opinion, stratagems often make or break a detachment. So they've got a stratagem, basically, when one of their units dies, if it was within engagement range, you can basically explode it, and you roll a 4+ for every unit within engagement range. On a 4+, you do D3 mortals to that unit, and if your Slaaneshi unit that died, you get +2 to that roll, so you'd be doing it on a 2-up, right? So that's pretty good. Especially if you can get, within engagement range multiple things, like if you're a big model. Then we've got another stratagem here, 1 CP for Lance. And if you're a Khorne unit, you get +1 to your AP as well. So +1 wound and +1 AP on the charge. Makes your units absolutely devastating. You've got an auto heal 3 flat. Whereas if you're Tzeentch, you actually heal back a model as well. That's a really good, utility strat. Healing models is always really good because you can do tricky things like basically kill yourself off of an objective. Your opponent thinks, oh cool, I don't have to put any more resources into that, and then in your command phase you just go, cool, I'm going to resurrect a model onto the objective and now I control it. Score those primary. Then we've got 1 demon and 1 marine unit that both arrive from Deep Strike, and they both gain ignore cover. Which, that's somewhat unimpressive. Ignoring cover is cool, but there's a lot of caveats there, like you have to have arrived from Deep Strike, you have to be a marine unit and a demon unit, so that one's a bit meh. Then the next one, though, is very, very good. So a marine unit, end of the fight phase, uppy downy. So basically being able to go, cool, my chosen have charged in, they've killed something, they're hiding, my opponent goes, oh, I'm not going to deal with those chosen now because they're too far away or whatever. And then being able to, cool, I'm going to pick up those chosen, and then because they gain Deep Strike from the detachment rule, I'm then going to Deep Strike them in next turn on the other side of the board. Or even turn 1, you've got your chosen in your backfield somewhere, your opponent has the first turn, they move out, at the end of their charge phase you can pick up your chosen, and then in your very first turn, you can Deep Strike your chosen and then go for a charge. So there's lots of really cool things you can do with uppy downy. It's a really, really powerful game mechanic. And yeah, it's very exciting to see that.
And then the last one is you get one demon and one, I'm going to guess that's one CSM unit for 2 CP. You get -2 to enemy charge rolls. So, and if it's Nurgle, they battle shock as well. So when your opponent goes to charge you, you can put a -2 to their charge on. And if you're a Nurgle unit that's the target of that charge, you inflict a battle shock test on them as well. Which this is fantastic, especially if your opponent's trying to deep strike and charge you from reserves, or just those situations where your opponent's going for those long bomb charges. You're probably not going to do this if your opponent needs to roll a 4 for the charge. But if your opponent needs to roll like a 6 or a 7, and you can make that an 8 or a 9, all of a sudden you've got a decent chance of spending 2 CP here to have them fail their charge. And if you're Nurgle, you get to battle shock them on top of that. So some really cool stratagems in there, and I'm a big fan of them, particularly the uppy downy. And then we've got the enhancements. Now this is where this detachment is really, really powerful. So you got Scout 9 inches. This is fantastic on things like a big unit of Possessed with a Master of Possessions in it, being able to scout that up. Things like Chosen, who have Advance and Charge, being able to scout that up. Really, really powerful. Or even just on like a unit of Bloodletters or Skull Crushers with a character attached to it, being able to just go, cool, I'm going to scout my Bloodletters up 9 inches, and then my Bloodletters now, which I'll get into in a moment, but they now have an 8-inch movement characteristic, so you go, cool, I'm scouting up 9, I'm then moving 8, so I've moved 17 inches, and then I'm advancing another d6, so I'm moving at an average of like 20 inches, and then I'm going to charge. So you're pretty much in your opponent's deployment zone charging him with Bloodletters turn 1. That's crazy. So that enhancement's out of control, and it's only 15 points. It should be like 35. Then we've got -1 OC to enemies within engagement range for 20 points. That's also really good because it just means that, you know, you can charge one unit, kill it, pile into another. Now you're in engagement range of it, and therefore you can make them all OC 0, take away their ability to control that objective, even though you didn't kill them. That's really, really good. And it also means it's very hard for your opponent to take objectives off of you, because you can just go, cool, well, I'm in engagement range of you, so you're OC 0. So you actually have to kill the unit in order to take the objective. You can't just out-OC me. Unless, of course, they're OC 2 bodies or something like that, you know, all the caveats apply. But yeah, being able to apply -1 OC to enemy units is fantastic. Then there's this one, which is crazy, which is if you kill an enemy unit in the fight phase, you return to Deep Strike. So this is 15 points, and it effectively turns whichever unit you put this on into Warp Talons. So, you know, Warp Talons can basically come out, kill something, and then disappear back into Deep Strike. Well, these guys are going to allow you to do that on any unit. You could put this on a Bloodthirster. He could charge something, kill it, and then disappear back into Deep Strike. Then, in your opponent's next turn, you rapid ingress him, and then you advance and charge him out, kill something else, and then disappear back into Deep Strike. And this is just absolutely bonkers. The amount of damage that you can do with this guy and make it so that there's no way your opponent can interact. Or, really interestingly, you can do this on a unit of Bloodletters with a character, right? And one of the main drawbacks of Bloodletters is that they're really easy to kill. They're very, very squishy. But their damage output is insane. And if you're able to go, cool, well, I'm going to kill something and then I'm going to disappear into Deep Strike, you can't interact with my Bloodletters, then they're going to drop behind this ruin here, you can't shoot them, they're going to advance and charge out from that position, kill something, and then disappear again. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And again, it's only 15 points. This should be like 35, maybe even more. This is one of the most broken enhancements I've seen in a long time. Being able to take arguably one of the most powerful rules from the Warp Talon datasheet and apply that to anyone. It's also worth noting you can put this on things like a Chosen unit, things like Possessed unit. You know, there's so many amazing candidates for that enhancement. And then the last one, which is a little bit less interesting, which is the start of the fight, units with engagement range take mortals on a roll. So I can't remember what the roll is, but it's you know, it's decent. Any way that you can deal additional mortal wounds to your opponent is always welcome. But yeah, that's the detachment. So the way I see this detachment working is it's going to heavily leverage the Scout 9-inch enhancement, the negative OC enhancement, and the killing things and disappearing into Deep Strike enhancement. I don't think you'll ever see the start of the fight phase mortal one, but you will see those 3 in every list. And then they're basically going to take advantage of the fact that you're getting all Marines getting deep strike, so you might be able to deep strike your chosen, rapid ingress them, and go in, kill something, disappear back into deep strike, cycling through like that. Meanwhile, you've got scouting units going up and doing damage, and being able to mess with your opponent's objective control makes this army have really good primary denial. Arguably some of the best primary denial in the game, because you can take away their OC with one unit whilst killing them and then disappearing with another. It's like for your opponent to hold the center, it's going to be very, very difficult for them. And meanwhile, you're not really sacrificing much, because you're able to do that with, again, you can take a unit of Warp Talons in this army. So you might take a unit of Warp Talons and a unit of Bloodletters with that enhancement, and now, depending on the target, you can send in your Bloodletters or your Warp Talons. Really, really cool. I think this is an A+ detachment, and I might actually do a separate video breaking this down in great detail with a few ideas for lists on how you could put this together, because I think there's a lot to unpack here. It's a very powerful detachment, so let me know what you guys think of this detachment in the comments section below. I think there's a lot to cover here. And then the last thing, I guess, is some general Demons updates, which is that Karanak has gone to Legends, and so have all of the Slaaneshi chariots. Karanak going to Legends is a bit upsetting, because he's such a cool character, such a cool model. I don't really understand why they did that. I guess they're trying to create a bigger separation between Age of Sigmar and 40k. But yeah, that's where we're at with this detachment.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
And now let's look at the new Demons datasheet updates. There's some really crazy stuff that's been updated on these datasheets. Now, I'm not coming at this from the perspective of a super experienced Demons player. I have a bit of an idea of what they do, but what I do know is that some of these new datasheets are going to pair extremely well with Chaos Space Marines and with the World Eaters, interestingly as well. So let's have a look. The main one is Khorne. This is the main one that I'm particularly interested in. So Skarbrand is now an absolute monster. So he now has Advance and Charge built into his datasheet, which means he's very good. His Flamer, it used to be Strength 5, AP 0, 1 damage, but now it's Strength 8, AP 1, 1 damage. So his Flamer is a lot better. And his Aura now gives +1 attack to every Khorne Demon unit, including himself. So he now has an additional attack in melee, which is really, really good because his attacks are out of control. And his movement went from 10 to 8 inch, from 8 to 10 inches. Sorry, 10 from 8. And basically, what that means is he's now got an extra 2 inches on his movement profile and Advance and Charge built in. So on average, he's moving 15.5 inches. No, sorry, 13.5, but 5.5 extra inches than what he used to. So he's a lot faster. And that's going to make him an absolute menace on the tabletop. He hits harder and is faster. So he's really cool. All the Bloodthirsters, which I believe includes Skarbrand, now have a 3-up armor save as well. And I played a few games with pure Khorne Demons, and one of the things that I did find deeply frustrating was that all of that AP 0 shooting was just ripping straight through to a 4-up invulnerable saves, and I was just dying to things like regular bolt guns and storm bolters and havoc launchers and stuff. So putting 3-up saves on them is very good. And against most weapons that you're trying to use to kill Bloodthirsters, it's not going to matter because you're going to be AP1 or AP2. So it's not that big of a deal. It just is a quality of life thing, I think, for the Bloodthirsters. Now, interestingly here, Bloodletters, including all of the characters, have an 8-inch move, which is absolutely phenomenal, and a new ability, which you may recognize from the Vessels of Wrath World Eaters Detachment, which is basically when the enemy goes to fall back, they have to take a desperate escape, and if they're battle shocked, it's at -1. So this is what that ability is insanely powerful. It's really, really good. And having an 8-inch move on the Bloodletters makes them so much more attractive. If they're if they're rapid ingressing and then going for a charge, previously you'd be rapid ingressing, going for your charge, which you only needed to roll like a 3 in theory. But in practice, there were a lot of instances where your opponent was able to go, cool, there's the one thing that you want to charge here, so 4 or 5 inches in front of it, they're going to put another unit, and then your Bloodletters are deep striking 9 inches away from that other unit, which means, you're 13, 14 inches away from the target. Which means then, when you go to move your 6 inches, you're looking for like an 8-inch charge to get around. Whereas now that you've got an 8-inch move, that goes a long way towards helping that rapid ingress play. And it also just means that if you're sitting behind a ruin somewhere, because Bloodletters are so squishy, you have to play super cagey with them. You can't let them be out in the open, because they just die. So, being able to go, cool, I'm going to sit them behind this ruin here. Well, with an 8-inch move, you can actually very reasonably threaten nearby objectives. So if your opponent puts something on a nearby objective, you're like, well, my Bloodletters can actually just come out from the ruins there and charge you. Whereas previously that was a little bit hard to do because they only had that movement characteristic of 6. And as for the fallback ability, this is crazy powerful because the amount of times that people will want to fall back and shoot, and you're just like, nope, if you do that, and if you're battle shocked, half of your unit is going to die. Because on a 1, 2, or a 3, if they're battle shocked, the model is removed as a casualty. So this is really, really good, and it's just another one of those ways that, as a combat army, Khorne-themed armies, whether this be allies in a World Eaters army, or as a pure Khorne army, or even just part of a mixed CSM sort of demons combo, either way, it's one of the ways that that combat army can account for enemy shooting, because we're just going to go, cool, we're going to charge your transport, blow it up, and then we're going to pile into the guys inside, and it's like, cool, now it's their turn. They can either stay in combat with you, which they don't want to do, because you get to fight first, and your Bloodletters, you'll rip them apart, so they're like, well, I guess I have to fall back then, but if they fall back, half of them are going to die just in the process of falling back. So it really does help fix one of the main problems that those Bloodletters have. Now, yes, they've lost their previous ability, which was like reroll 1s to wound, or I think it was full rerolls if the enemy was battle shocked or something like that. So their damage output has gone down slightly, but I think that this fallback shenanigans is much, much more effective. Next, we've got Blood Crushers. They have a 3-up save now, just like the Bloodthirsters. We've already covered how good that is. But here, this next one is something that I think is particularly interesting, which is that Fleshhounds have uppy downy. So basically what that means is if you're not within engagement range, at the end of your opponent's turn, you can pick up your Fleshhounds and put them back in Deep Strike. Now, this is crazy good for a World Eaters army, because one of the things that we struggle with is, like, being reactive to your opponent. If your opponent, like, goes over here, you have to chase them over there, and then you kill them, but now you're all the way over there, and you want to be heading in that direction, So, because all of the damage we do is done in combat, we often have to, like, redirect our forces to chase things down. Whereas these guys will be able to go, cool, the Fleshhounds go and kill it, and then at the end of the phase, they jump up into space, and the next turn, I draw my cards, and I deep strike them over on that other side of the board. So, that utility is something that World Eaters desperately needed, and I'm loving seeing that the Fleshhounds bring it to the World Eaters arsenal. It also just means that, like, say turn 1 you get, your opponent goes first, they move a bunch of things around, you pick up your Fleshhounds at the end of their turn, and then if you draw containment, you can just go, cool, I'm just going to drop 2 Fleshhounds over in that corner, 2 units of 5, and double contain. One contains that battlefield edge, one contains that battlefield edge, done. Or if you draw engage on all fronts, you can go, cool, I'm going to drop 1 in that quarter, 1 in that quarter, and now I get my engagement all fronts. Or, oh, I got area denial. I'm just going to drop one of them in the center to get my area denial, and I'm going to drop the other one back in my own backfield somewhere so that I can use it later in the game. It just gives you so much flexibility, because knowing that if, let's say, hypothetically, you do that containment play and you drop in the corner, you contain both edges, you know that at the end of your opponent's next turn, you can pick those two fleshhounds up and then go do engagement, or then go do behind enemy lines. You know, your opponents move forward, you pick them up, you put them in your opponent's backfield, boom, more victory points. So fleshhounds have just become a absolute premium resource in terms of objective play. Now, the downside is, of course, that you still have to take bloodletters because you need one battle line unit for every non-battle line unit. So you're probably going to just take one unit of bloodletters, one unit of fleshhounds. It's also really disappointing that that bloodletter unit can't take a character, because if it does, that's one character that's not battle line, one bloodletter unit that is, which means if you wanted to take fleshhounds, you'd have to take a second unit of bloodletters. So it is very cumbersome and very difficult to work it in. Ultimately, I think from the perspective of a World Eaters player, there's every chance that you just take a unit of bloodletters with a character attached, and that's one of your rapid ingress threats that's relatively cheap, does huge amounts of damage, and can do fallback shenanigans, and sort of fills a similar role to 3 Exalted 8-bound, where it's like the 3 Exalted 8-bound, often they just deep strike in with a rapid ingress and then go and kill something, and then they're probably going to die next turn. Similar thing with the bloodletters, but the bloodletters have a little bit more utility, and probably a little bit more damage output. So, yeah, really, really happy with the changes to Khorne. We'll go through the other ones relatively quick, because I'm simultaneously less knowledgeable about them and also selfishly less interested. Kairos, Fateweaver, his now ability, he used to have Vect, which was basically he would increase the cost of enemy command points by 1. Now, instead, when he passes a leadership test, you gain 1 CP. That's significantly worse. Gaining CP is something that you can often already do from other sources, even if it is just at the end of your turn discarding one of your tactical cards. That'll generate you a CP. So having an ability on one of your units to generate command points is nowhere near as good, and having the ability to negatively impact your opponent's command point is relatively unique, and thus highly valuable. So, yeah, Kairos, that's a significant nerf as far as I'm concerned. Then Nurgle got quite a big shake-up, so Rodriguez's fight phase aura is now 24 inches, and his neg 2 move and neg 1 OC is no longer half move, half OC. It's now neg 2 to the move and neg 1 to the OC, so that's a bit of a nerf. His melee did get buffed. It went from strength 8 to strength 10, and his sweep went from strength 7 to strength 8. The Great Unclean One and Rodriguez now have a 6-up Feel No Pain, and the Great Unclean One's aura is now +1 toughness for nearby Nurgle units, which is obviously very, very good. And then his blade went from strength 8 to strength 10, with d6 damage going to d6 +1. So the Great Unclean One got significantly better, so if you are looking at including them in your Nurgle army, his +1 toughness aura is fantastic, and he also, just him and Rodriguez both have the 6-up Feel No Pain inbuilt now. Beasts now scout 6 inches, which is very interesting. They, being able to scout is one of the most powerful things in the game, because it allows you to do things like deploy in the open, knowing that if your opponent goes first, you're going to scout back into safety, but if you go first, you're going to scout forward. So it allows you to basically, essentially gain a significant deployment advantage with scout. That's how I view it. So beasts having that is fantastic. And then Nurglings, now their -1 to hit is only whilst within engagement range. It used to project out 6-inch aura, but it affects all units except Titanic, whereas it used to not affect vehicles and monsters. So their -1 is a lot harder to utilize. So, for example, it used to be really frustrating as a World Eaters player, where people would create like a ball of something, and in the middle of the ball would be their Nurglings, and I couldn't attack the Nurglings without being in engagement range of everything else. But because the Nurglings were projecting a 6-inch aura, then their ability to hurt my hit rolls was still effective. So that was really annoying. Whereas now, in order for that to happen, they actually have to be within engagement range of you, which means I can just kill the Nurglings first and then make my attacks and do everything else. So, bit of a nerf for the Nurglings, but we did see a points reduction for them, so I don't think it's all that bad. Other data sheets, we've got Slaneshi. Tons of changes for the Slaneshi. This is to align them with what we've seen in the Emperor's Children Codex. Shalaxi has a 3-up armor, reroll advance and charge rolls, and now picks a target for reroll hits and wounds. And when that target is killed, they can reallocate. Keepers lost their Feel No Pain. Their shield is now a 3-up armor save. That's significantly worse because, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the guns that are going to be shooting at you is going to ignore your 3-up armor because they're going to be AP 1 or 2. Whereas the Feel No Pain was something that you could never get ignored, so that's a significant nerf. The Entraptress now fights first, as does the Contorted Epitome, so that's really good. Fights first is one of the most broken rules in the game, especially on a combat unit, so that's really good to see. Transweaver has a new ability, which is reroll hits of 1 within a marker range, all hits, and end the move, pick a shocked unit, and all Slanesh units reroll hits and wounds into that target. So that's really interesting. However, you do have to pick a battle shock unit, so trying to inflict that battle shock in a timely manner so that you're able to actually get value out of this might be difficult, but very interesting. Demonettes just gained fight first. That's their new ability, and they also, at the start of the fight phase, units within engagement range take a battle shock test. So this is like, obviously that's designed to go with the Transweaver, so you basically use your Demonettes to inflict a battle shock test on them, then if they fail it, and you have a Transweaver nearby, you're going to reroll hits and wounds against them. In a pure Demons detachment, this could be really good because there's multiple ways of stacking those, those battle shock debuffs. So you could get a lot of mileage out of your Demonettes. And last, but not last, the Fiends. They're now non-monster, non-vehicles. No more neg 1 to hit, but they have a new fallback ability. And then Seekers gained fights first. So it looks like fights first is a big theme for Slanesh. We've seen that in the Emperor's Children Codex, is that there's multiple sources of fights first in there, whether it be on Lucius the Eternal, whether it be on Fulgrim, or whether it be on their various enhancements and detachment abilities giving them fights first. So there's some really good stuff there, and then they've sort of brought that across to Slaneshi as well. So it looks like they're leaning away from the speed as Slanesh's defining characteristic and leaning a little bit more into its fight first ability. And then last we got Be'lakor. He now has 7 attacks. He can loan up Marines in the new detachment, so his ability that he picks at the start of that battle round projects an aura of 18-inch loan up. He can now do that for Marines, which is really, really cool. So you could have like a bunch of obliterators nearby, and people can't shoot your obliterators because they're near Be'lakor, but the obliterators can shoot them. Things like that are kind of interesting. And he can also force battle shock tests on anybody below starting strength. What else we got here? His last aura is now reroll hits of 1. Which is really good because previously Demons didn't have any effective ways of getting reroll hits, whereas now he's got the 3 different auras that he can pick from, and one of them allows reroll hit rolls of 1. And he's got a 3+ save and 20 wounds, so he's quite tough. He's quite good. He hits way harder, and looking at his data sheet, there's some changes there as well that aren't listed here, but I think he gets extra pip of AP on both of his profiles, and maybe an extra pip of strength. But looking at the maths, it looks like nowadays, on average, Be'lakor, if he charges 5 Marines, he'll kill them, and if he charges 10 Guardsmen, he'll kill all 10 of them pretty comfortably, which is exactly what you want to be at. You want to be able to reliably kill that sort of stuff, because the last thing you want to do is charge 5 Marines and kill 3 of them, and then the 2 of them have 4 OC, and then all of a sudden you're not controlling the objective, and it can be an absolute nightmare. Or, you charge 10 Guardsmen and you kill 8 of them, and then those 2 fall back onto an objective somewhere. And now it's like, well, now I need to dedicate some resources to killing 2 fucking Guardsmen. That's going to be really, really frustrating. So Be'lakor's changes put him in a very comfortable position, in my opinion. So yeah, that more or less breaks down all of the changes that I have seen that I found interesting. Now, obviously, this update only just dropped, so more will come out. People will find new tricks and new ways of utilizing these changes and new impacts that they have. This is sort of just my first glance, and like I said, this was done based off of a summary of the changes that was sent to me, so I haven't personally dug through everything in as much detail as I'm going to, but I wanted to get something out there now so that we can start the conversation in the comments below. So let's talk about it down there. Bring to my attention anything that I may have missed. I'll continue to do my digging and I'll bring things to your attention. And then basically we'll put together another video with perhaps a deep dive on that detachment specifically and what's the best way to get the mileage out of that as a new mixed combined arms of Chaos Demons and Chaos Space Marines. And then I'll also look at doing a potentially like a best World Eaters ally video where I'll talk about what we can add with these new Chaos Demons, and also whether or not Chaos Knights are a valid option, or what the best ways to ally in with your World Eaters are is another idea that I've got. But I want to make sure that I'm doing that right, and I want to put in the sufficient work. And as you guys have probably noticed, there's been a fewer videos on the channel lately. That's just because I'm currently in the position of captain for Team Australia for the WTC, the World Team Championships, and I'm also captain of Team Victoria, my home state, for the Australian and New Zealand Team Championships, which is kind of like a mini WTC held in Australia. So there's I'm captain of those two teams, which is a lot of work, and I'm basically prioritizing that. So that means that I get to spend a little bit less time self-indulgently putting out these videos. I've got to spend a little bit more time meeting my responsibilities and my commitments to those teams. So apologies if the videos have been a little bit less frequent than we are used to, but I will do my best to make sure we keep them coming. I've actually got a deal with one of the players for Team Australia, Jeremy Martino, who you would have seen him on the channel before. He's agreed to basically come on the channel, and he's going to put in a bunch of work putting together a update on each Chaos Space Marine detachment, and we're going to be talking about what with all of these changes, what's the best list for each detachment, what stratagems are worthwhile, which ones have a greater impact in the current meta. So an update of my masterclass series that I did for each detachment. We're basically going to re-release that with all of the updates that we now know, and that's going to be really interesting. So you can expect to see that coming out over the next month. There'll be I think there's like 10 videos planned for that, and then obviously we've got a World Eaters Codex on the very imminent horizon, so I'll be planning a lot of videos around that. So there's tons of content coming out. I have not gone anywhere. I just took it's not even a break because I've been insanely busy, so to call it a break would not be genuine. But I've had to take a redirection of my attention away from the YouTube side of things, and put it into other things. So apologies to those of you who come here for your regular updates, but I'm trying to juggle many things, so I appreciate those of you who do stick around and show your support, and yeah, very much appreciate it. I've got a very good setup here, and I couldn't be more appreciative of those of you who support me and allow me to do the things that I do. So thank you again, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Look for the Blood God.